kickoff event for virtual reunion weekend 2020. This is one for the history books. Just before we got started, actually, Charlie Guy asked me if we'd ever had to cancel or postpone reunion, and not that I know of, but I'm pleased that so many of you are joining in tonight from all around the country and all around the globe. We've got Canada, we've got several countries represented: Canada, Bahamas, New Zealand, Germany, Panama, and of course we have alumni calling in from all over the United States: California, Texas, Arizona, Louisiana, New Hampshire, and all the states in the Mid-Atlantic. So thank you for being here with us tonight for this evening. We have 7 decades of alumni who have joined in from the class years of 1953 to 2020 with our panelists, our most recent graduates. And you know, before we get into introductions, I have just a few words that I want to share with you. I was lucky enough to be on the fringes of this year-long project, and I will say for me that one of the highlights of the story that you'll hear tonight is that we had some amazing connection and reconnection that happened between current students and alumni. And I feel that this type of connection and the dialogue that ensued wasn't always easy. And I think you'll probably hear that from the stories tonight, but it was an important dialogue. And as I think about what's going on right now in our country and our world, it's critical that Mercersburg Academy continue to foster these opportunities for dialogue. In a letter that was shared earlier this week with our community, our head of school, Katie Titus, said, I commit that we will continue to create more dialogue, more opportunities, and more space for our community to learn and come together to elicit the change we need for today and in the future. I'm incredibly proud of these students and their teachers and all of the alumni who were involved in this project, and for their work in engaging in the dialogue around the history of Tom Leslie. I want to give a special recognition to our seniors who are on the call. They graduated from Mercersburg Academy less than 2 weeks ago. So welcome. We welcomed them officially then into the alumni community, but welcome again. And we are so excited that in just 5 years, in June 2025, these students will be coming home to Mercersburg for their first official reunion, their 5th reunion. And I know that all of the alumni who are in this cycle, the 0s and 5s, will welcome you with open arms. So let's get started. We are joined here tonight with students in the Parallel Histories and Com Arts class, Abba Sanka and Campbell Prentice. And I hope that Peter Palega will join us at some point. He is, I believe, living in Saudi Arabia, so there's quite a time difference there. But we are also joined by their teachers, Dean of Curricular Innovation, John David Bennett, and Arts faculty member, Kristen Pixler, and alum Charlie Guy from the class of 1965, who would be celebrating his 55th reunion this weekend, or who is celebrating, I should say. And in honor of the school's 55th anniversary of Black student integration, the students worked together to produce the documentary film about Tom Leslie that hopefully you all have already taken the time to watch. And this was a part of their Springboard senior capstone course. And it's truly a remarkable project to celebrate the legacy and the life of Tom Leslie. I want to share a couple of housekeeping items here at the beginning before I turn it over to our panelists. If you have questions or a comment that you would like to make, there are a couple of ways you can do that. You can raise your hand, which should be a feature for you down at the bottom, and we can unmute you and you can make a comment or ask your question live. Or you can use the Q&A feature to ask your questions, which I will serve as a moderator. So without further ado, I'm going to allow our panelists to introduce themselves. Abba, would you do us the pleasure of going first?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. My name is Abba. I'm originally from Ghana, but I now reside in Bradenton, Florida.
Thank you, Abba. Ed Campbell.
Hi, I'm Campbell Prentice. I live in Andover, Massachusetts at the moment, and I will be attending Elon University next year.
Oh, Abba, you need to say where you're going next year.
Oh, yes, I will be attending the University of Pennsylvania in the fall.
Wonderful. Congratulations again to you both. Kristen Pixler.
Hi, I'm Kristen Pixler. I'm going into actually my 7th year as faculty here at Mercersburg Academy and my 8th year as a coach. I teach mainly the digital arts, but I am honored to have the opportunity to work with our seniors in our senior capstone class, Com Arts. That is my specific course in the Springboard. Thank you for coming.
Great, thank you. Charlie.
I'm Charlie Guy. I live in St. Petersburg, Florida. I had the privilege of not only going to Mercersburg, but also sending my two sons, Chuck, class of 88, and Nat, 93. And then in 1987, I returned to Mercersburg to restore the Mercersburg Inn. I did have a period in my life where I was a bit estranged from the academy for what now seems to be foolish reasons, like they changed the name from the Blue Devils to Blue Storm. There I was at Duke. I was a Blue Devil. It was so much easier just remembering one item. And then I didn't like having to go in the summer for my reunions. It's too hot, and I'm from Florida, and I love the fall. But as strange as all that sounds, I am re-engaged now as a result of meeting with Tom Newby this past September, where when we talked about times past, Tom Leslie's name came up, and we decided that we had the time and the interest and the passion to try to find out more about this. A few phone calls ending up with Jen and JD. We found out about Abba's project. We were kindly invited and to help, and we became content researchers. And from that, made a lot of new old friends and some new friends from old acquaintances, and it was a fun time.
Thank you, Charlie. And John David.
I'm John David Bennett. I'm the Dean of Curricular Innovation at Mercersburg Academy. I'm also the director of the Springboard program, which is one of our two capstone programs. I've been teaching at the Academy for 13 years, and I now teach. For this past year, I taught 2 Springboard courses, one called Write Your Novel and the other Parallel Histories, the one that brings us here tonight. And next year I'll be teaching 3. I'll be picking up the Open Topic Springboard course. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you for those introductions. So again, I want to remind all of those who are with us tonight about how you can ask a question or make a comment. I'll be monitoring that. You can raise your hand and we can unmute you, make you live, or you can use the Q&A feature. But I'm going to lead with a question that may be on the minds of several of our attendees, but I think we're interested in learning a little bit more about what Springboard is. What is Springboard? And I'd like to hear from the students first. What is Springboard? Abba or Campbell?
Abba, do you want me to go first and then you can chime in after? Springboard is, as Mr. Bennett said, just your senior capstone project. So along with, depending on the student, either 4 or 5 other academic classes, you'll have a Springboard class, which you'll meet with almost every day to work and more narrow your interest, and as the name says, kind of springboard you into college and see what you might like to do with kind of the rest of your life, or just start to figure it out. So yeah.
Great, thank you. Abba, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think what I love most about Springboard is that we are really not limited in Springboard. We really have the opportunity to dive into any realm of interest we may have, and we have faculty who fully support us to help us to our end goal. And there's been a lot of cool projects. We did a documentary, but there have been other people who produce actual physical objects, and the opportunities range from all different areas.
Great, thank you. John David or Kristen, what do you want to fill in so people have a more a deeper understanding of what is Springboard.
Kristen, I'd like to follow you on this one, because I think that your class is probably the most prototypical, most sort of the purest Springboard course. So, you know, if you can explain what happens there.
So I guess for me, Springboard is just a place kind of where students can be guided into finding kind of their passion project and be given the resources and support to be able to attain those goals. It is very student driven, where I think there are many teachers who, when they first learn about Springboard, they kind of ask like, well, what do you do? Because it is largely student driven. But for me, you'll hear me refer to myself as a project manager. I am constantly juggling about 30 or so projects throughout the year between my two classes. And it's just so invigorating to be able to see our students like grab on to things that they truly love. And my goal is always to find projects for my students that they really love and that they're so invested in that they don't really pay attention to how hard they work. I think that if we counted the hours of Campbell, Abba, and Peter's workload this year, and all of the crazy things that they did to attain this wonderful project and make it come to life, I'm not sure if it was just a project that they were lukewarm about, that they didn't truly feel that passion and love for the project. I doubt that it would happen, although they both are tremendous, and Peter included, tremendous students.
Right, and so in the Parallel Histories class, it is essentially a Mercersburg history class, but I'm not teaching Mercersburg history. We have these stories, these sketches of stories from our 126-year history, and the students pick one, they choose one. I might introduce them to one or two or three, but they'll go diving into all the archived editions of the Mercersburg News, go through yearbooks, talk to whomever about Tim Rockwell, for example, who might be able to give us some leads, and they'll pick up the story and they'll carry it. And for example, this year, a student, Caroline Cronick, she told the story of one of the Mercersburg men who died in the First World War. And he, somewhat ironically, didn't make his name didn't make it onto the plaque that honored all of World War I, all of the young men who died in World War I, Mercersburg graduates who died. And she managed to contact people all over the country, was able to get original photographs of the man, was able to get the last three letters that he wrote home, and was essentially reintroducing even his family to who this man was. My role was to encourage her, to continue to help her to find the resources, but she was coming to me every day with the amazing things that she was finding. I think that might be my favorite part about being a Springboard quote unquote teacher. I may be more of a facilitator, maybe more of a guide at times, but probably most often, I don't know if Abba would agree with this, as a cheerleader. And that my favorite part is I'm learning so much about Mercersburg history from these kids from the very first week of school. Jen, I hope you don't mind the way that Abba and I connected with the project that she would eventually do. Is when she was in 11th grade, she was in my AP English class. And we were reading some pieces from the Atlantic Monthly by Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I'm not sure exactly how I got to telling the story of Tom Leslie, his first football game at Randolph-Macon, that I had learned from Ron Seymour, and I don't know if Ron's here tonight, I hope he is, that I had learned in 2016 when I was asked to do a presentation about Tom Leslie, the class of 1966, which I thought was sort of a silly task, that I would stand before the class of 66 and tell them about what Mercersburg was like in 1966. So instead, I sort of gathered what I could from the archives, And I would show them artifacts, and they told me these amazing stories. And a session that was scheduled for an hour went like an hour and 45 minutes, and probably could have gone on for several more hours. So I told that story, and Abba lingered a little bit after class, and whether it was that day or another, and she told me that she wanted to take parallel histories because she wanted to tell the rest of that story. Then, the day before classes, this last September, I was walking through campus, and Jen Bradley and I ran into one another. And she said that she'd had this conversation with a guy named Charlie Guy, who had called, coincidentally, because he wanted to see what he could find out about Tom Leslie. That's remarkable, because Abba Sanka will begin working on a project about Tom Leslie. And then for the full length of the first term, she and 3 other students worked together and did a remarkable term length project, which Abba, going into the winter, picked up and carried on her own. Abba, do you want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, and then so one day at lunch, Peter and Campbell came up to my table, and they were like so nervous, and they were just like, Abba, we want to help you with this Tom Leslie story. Let us tell it with you. Let's make a movie. And I was like, absolutely. And it was like so funny, because you guys remember how you like took a breath of fresh air. You're like, oh, thank God. We thought you were going to say no. And I was like, no, the more the merrier. And I love group projects. And I think that the special part about our team is that we were just all so passionate about this, like equally. I don't think that there was just one person who was more passionate about it. And I think that's where the magic happened in our project. What about you, Campbell?
Yeah, Peter and I kind of had joined together early on in the comm arts year, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to do something meaningful. I didn't want to have another comm arts project that maybe like fell to the bottom of the class. I know when I first showed up in comm arts, there were a few people like, Campbell, this is comm arts. This isn't like, I don't know what you're doing in this class. But I knew I kind of wanted to just do something that would be impactful and had no real direction with that. And then with talking to Miss Pixler, I had freshman year done a project about kind of the duality, a photo project about the duality of Mercersburg and the town itself, and told Miss Pixler I'd maybe be interested in doing a documentary along those lines. And she said, well, there's actually a parallel histories project that you guys might be interested in, and an alumni who's interested in kind of having a tangible project about one of our alumni. And then that's when we approached Abba, and she said yes. Thankfully, Peter and I were very nervous. Had a few sweaty palms going up to her, like, oh no, Abba's going to tell us to like just go do our own thing, like get out of her project. But it was nice when she said yes.
Charlie, would you like to add anything to that in terms of how you came to be involved? I mean, I know John David shared a little bit of the story of you reaching out to me, but I think there's more to that before you called me.
Yes, and this is my first talking Zoom. Am I being heard now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, it was very, very strange circumstances because Tom Newby and I, since we hadn't been real active in the academy for a while, weren't sure that we would be well accepted to try to work together. And my first conversation with Jen, I didn't tell her what I really was interested in. And she starts explaining to me this fabulous course called Springboard and gave as an example Abba and Tom Leslie. Well, with that, my ears perked up. And from there, she sent me via phone call to JD. And as JD reminded me the other day, I think we talked at 5 o'clock on a Saturday morning for 2 hours.
Yes.
Comparing notes. And I got so excited when he told me about Ron's accounting of the Randolph-Macon game, because it opened the door to a story that I think had Abba not done this, might have never come to light. And that was the story about Leonard Plants and how he almost single-handedly negotiated with Randolph-Macon Academy a very delicate situation where they had seen the tape of our scrimmage against the Shippensburg freshman team, where we had a bit of a riot where and I was shocked as a Southerner, 11 white Northern people, 5 of them went and attacked Tom and called him the N-word. Well, the RMA coach and athletic director viewed the tape, had to tell the head of school, and they didn't want Tom to come to the game. They didn't want him to play. They finally negotiated, said, well, he can come to the game, but he can't play. And Leonard Plant, bless his heart, stood and fought for the rights of Mercersburg. And I have put in writing several places. They may have won the game 25-0, but we won our first victory for DEI. And I think it was just something that could not have been planned between you and I. And then I got it confirmed by Tom Steiger and Leonard Jr., who had gone up and talked with his father, and he told him exactly the same story. And then the last thing I'd say is that the networking then through 5 really key people, Buzz Esmel, John Versandic, John Hook, and Tom Newby, all of the academy. And then Tom Leslie's roommate for football, Mark Warner at the University of Pennsylvania. So we actually got firsthand visual accountings of his story, which then Abba and Peter and Campbell made such a great film.
Wonderful. So I think, Charlie, because you mentioned several people who were involved in helping the students, I'd be curious to hear a little bit more from Abba and Charlie, or excuse me, Abba and Campbell, about how did you decide who to interview? And what were there any lessons learned there about who to interview? And of course, you were interrupted with your ability to work together because you went home for spring break and didn't come back to campus. So I guess it's really a 2-part question. How did you decide who to interview? Who did you try to interview that you couldn't? And then talk a little bit about the technique of how you were able to accomplish doing those interviews while we were all in stay-at-home orders.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Campbell, do you want me to tackle how we figured out how to interview and you tackle the next part? Okay, sounds good. So basically, Charlie met with me in Florida. He actually lives like 45 minutes away from me. So we met for lunch and he was just telling me his story and his experience in a very like vulnerable and raw way about his relationship with Tom. And Charlie, was like friends with Tom. He knew Tom. So I kind of just stemmed off of the stories he told me about Tom and who the people he was closest with. And the cool thing about Charlie is that every question that I had, even if he didn't have the answer to it, he would just go and dive in and reach out to people so they could connect with me. So it kind of just started with Charlie just emailing a couple of his buddies, and they were like, oh my goodness, yeah, send her our way. And so we just basically just started off of that, and we would just, Campbell, Peter, and I would just schedule the interviews every block we would meet. We didn't really we never got like a contact. We never FaceTimed or interviewed them. It was really important for us to get anyone we could get. And I think the one person that we really wish we got was Tom's mom or any of his family members. It was really hard to find them and track them down. And to this day, when I'm very proud of our documentary, and I think we created a very beautiful outcome. But if there's one thing that I wish we had, it was if we could have interviewed any of the Leslies.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other interview that might have been missing, and I hope I'm saying the right person, was it Tom Fleming who we weren't able to, who kind of was a little wary of interviewing with us? And
No.
Which one was it again? Who
it was the man, Abba, that you had the letter correspondence with. He sent you a letter, but he was...
Oh, Kurt Farrar?
Yes, Kurt Farrar, yes.
Farrar. Tom
Farrar,
Fleming,
yeah.
I think,
he was a classmate with Tom.
Yep.
That's wrong person.
Yeah.
But yes, that would have been the other person we would have liked to interview, because he was attending Mercersburg at around the same time and was also an African-American male who could have given us a as close to Tom's perspective as we were going to be able to get without Tom actually being here. But I think in terms of the interviews, we were really lucky that we did our due diligence and planned properly for this project, and were able to have all of our interviews completed before we left for spring break, so that the only job left was to really put those all together and make it the final film. I think one of my regrets is a little different than Abba's. Not that we both have the same regrets, but mine more as like the filmmaker of the story would have liked to be given a budget, be given like a big contract, big budget to be able to travel to different parts of the country and be able to interview different people, so that we didn't have to have the FaceTime interviews. Just stylistically and aesthetically, those were probably, in my eyes, the weak links of our project. But that's one of the only regrets I have. Other than that, I agree with Abba. I'm very happy with what we were able to produce.
As you should be. It's wonderful. Charlie, do you have a comment?
Yeah, although what we call as past students, I know that you guys call us alumni, but I'd rather be a past student working with a current student. Although our role was primarily to try to dig up content and give it to them, I have to tell you that Abba had already found some things that some of us hadn't found over the years, and taught us some things like go to the school newspapers. And she found 2 great articles in the University of Pennsylvania newspaper, which I thought were outstanding. And then the other thing I want to say for the record, I'll cry when I say it, those pictures of the mental health hospital in Massachusetts, the way you did that, guys, were spectacular. And when that picture of a cell came in, it matched exactly what Buzz Esmond told me he saw when he visited him on 2 occasions. And that was so powerful that it's remarkable what you guys did. And we thank you for it.
Thanks, Charlie. Abba, I have a question for you, specifically from one of our participants. Abba, going into this project, did you know about the end of Tom's story? And as you learned more about it, how did it affect you?
Oh, that's a good question. I really didn't know. When we first started this project, I think I immediately thought that it would have like this like great happy ending. I thought that I was gonna like find Tom, and he was gonna be this like super cool person who I would like want him to be my mentor going in when I first started this project and learned Tom's story. That's how I thought it would be. And it wasn't until later in the fall when I found it out that I think that was when I first got emotional. I got emotional many points during this project, but that was the first time when I found out that it wasn't a happy ending that I kind of wanted it to be. And I immediately like had this like really long conversation with Mr. Bennett about it, because I didn't want Tom's ending to detract from the beauty and his brilliance in our Academy's history. And so that was a very touchy spot for me, because I didn't want people to hear his story and just like have these like preconceived notions about it, because he still is my hero and I still have so much respect for him, and I wanted our project to match that. And so yeah, so that's what I had to do from there. But I definitely didn't know about the ending when I first started.
Can I jump back in and share that when we heard, Abba, that you were doing that story, Tom Newby and I, and then a few others, we were very frightened about how it would be handled. And we had some glimpses. We knew where it was going, and our fear was different. Our fear was that we had a different experience as being students that lived with Tom and played with him, and in some cases, in Tom Newby's case, actually visited his home and met his mother and so forth, that it was going to be a sad story, and it wasn't going to be the usual story that poor kid, black kid goes to an all-white school, and all of a sudden he's going to have this great successful life, because we saw Tom's success in a much different way, and that was how he touched our lives. And at first, Tom Newby and I thought we were the only ones that felt that way. But as we talked to the others, we all came to the agreement that Tom was very successful. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a lawyer. He doesn't have 5 grandkids like some of us do. But what I want to share is that the success of the initial integration struggles by any school should never be judged by just how the lives of our new fellow black classmates were improved, but rather how our lives were and will continue to be enhanced by their inclusion. And that was the success of your story, because I think from all the views you got, people got a glimpse of a very unusual young man who still has an impact on my life today in St. Petersburg, Florida.
Thanks, Charlie. This is another question for Abba and Campbell, although I think anyone is welcome to weigh in, and I hope I get the question right. But as your video incorporates historical framing about the civil rights movement, what are your feelings about how your work on the Tom Leslie story? Abba and Campbell.
Campbell, do you want to start?
Sure. Just so I understand the question completely, it's just how did we reconcile with ourselves, like how to kind of combine those two stories together? Is that the question? Or how to tell both?
I think so. I think that is the question, yes.
Yeah, so that was one of those parts of the story which, had we not had such a great support system, I don't think I would have known to touch on it, or touch on it as deeply as we did. I'm not sure if Abba would say the same, but that was a suggestion very early on from our friend and mentor, David Taylor, who won an Emmy in documentary filmmaking and specialized in the civil rights movement era, and has produced numerous films for the History Channel and such. And he told us that the story would carry more weight if we were able to contextualize it and give some background about what was happening at the time. And so that was in the back of our minds the entire time we were telling this story. And I don't think we would have been doing the story justice if we hadn't also told the story of what was happening in America at the time, because it really influenced a majority of I would say it influenced a majority of what Tom saw, experienced, and had to go through.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. For me, I think that with everything going on in the country right now, I think that it makes me even more proud that we did a project on this. I think that if there was ever a year that our school needed a project like this, I definitely think it was the 2019-2020 school year. And I think it was Campbell, Peter, and I, we had like a lot of conversations about it, which points to highlight. And even there were moments where in our documentary, you hear Charlie say the N-word. And even that, just because of how delicate our topic was, it was moments like that where we had to have like a lot of conversations on how we were going to handle that. And we just wanted it to be a place where Tom's race just wasn't the focal point of the story, but his story was. And so with the civil rights movement, I think that it kind of helped shine the bright light that we wanted to highlight Tom in, because that's the light that we saw Tom in. And so we needed to match that energy. And I think we did that.
Yeah, I'd like to say that that was what really touched a lot of us, because way back when, we didn't have 24-hour news coverage and internet and so forth. We all knew about the racial issues at the time. But at that time at Mercersburg, Tom was just another guy playing football and studying too long and hard. And we didn't see it, or we didn't feel it, or we didn't really understand it until that first game, where we did have a situation. And luckily, we never knew about the Randolph-Macon thing. That was a fight done in private. Race wasn't a real issue to us. It was more about Tom just had a fantastic personality and a way of dealing with people that touched a lot of lives.
Great, thank you. We have somebody, Richard Himes, who is, I think, raising his hand to ask a live question or make a comment. Denise, if you want to go ahead and let Richard share.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. First, a hello to Charlie.
Hi, Richard. How are you?
Class of 65 as well.
Yep.
And I really appreciate your involvement in this and the expression of how much Tom meant to those of us who knew him, both as a student and someone we played football with. I was on that same team and played with him, and we lived in the same dorm, became good friends. And one story other than those, when we were students at the academy, after I graduated in 65, I don't even remember the details, but I drove back through Mercersburg the following summer. I don't know whether Tom was in summer school or whether it was the start of the next school year. But I was driving through campus and just slowly admiring the beauty of the school. And I heard from an upper room in Kyle Hall, Ricky. Ricky. It was Tom Leslie, saw me driving through from his dormitory window and came running down to say hi. And it was just a perfect example of the kind of exuberance that he had and the connection that he had with the people that he had met at the school. It was a pleasure for me. Charlie, all of us who knew him, it was special. Let me also ask, Jen, are you related to the Flanagans from Norwich, New York?
I am, yes.
Well, Tom Flanagan, that's where I lived during some of the years I was going to Mercersburg, and knew Tom and played squash with him and some of the other Flanagans. So hello to you.
Oh, thank you. Hello to you.
And Campbell, wasn't your dad in the class of 65?
Yes, sir. Not quite my dad, my grandfather. He was in
Your
the
grandfather. Okay. Well, I wasn't sure. I didn't know whether he might have had a younger child.
Possible.
Say hi to your father for me.
We'll do.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm delighted that you're doing this. I had planned to be there for this 55th reunion, but clearly times changed. But it's good to be able to see everybody virtually. So done.
Thank you, Richard. Granville Smith, who I believe is in the class of 1969, has raised his hand, so I'm going to call on him next to make a comment or ask a question. Hi, Granville. Are you there, Granville? Maybe not. We'll come back to you, Granville.
One thing that I think is remarkable about the telling of this story is it has continued, at least since 2016, to assert itself, to put itself in front of us. With the class of 66 reunion, yes, it was brought to me, but then a couple of days after I was asked to do the presentation for the class of 66, Ron Seymour and I, by coincidence, were in his truck going out to watch a former softball player play in a college game. And on the way back, I told him about this assignment I'd been given. And he said, "Tom Leslie, I think I have a story for you about Tom Leslie." And that story was about the game at Randolph-Macon. And then at the reunion that year, there was a trip that went out to Gettysburg, and I was asked, this, a total coincidence, to be on that trip, just to, like a faculty member on the trip. And I sat near the back of the bus that went out next to a man named Bill Hackett, And I said, and I noticed that his class year was 66, and I asked him again. There was an open seat sat next to him, and I said, "Did you know Tom Leslie?" He goes, "Yeah, I knew Tom Leslie. He was my roommate." And so for an hour, he started telling me all these Tom Leslie stories. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the by chance. I mean, Jim Bradley and I don't run into each other on campus very often.
I wish
I'm not
it was
suggesting
more.
yeah, right. And I'm not suggesting that there are cosmic powers out there that are pushing this story, but sometimes it certainly seems like it. And I've been somewhat attached to the story since 2016. And the one thing that I wish that would just present itself, and I want to believe that it's out there, is the poem that he wrote that won the John Mountain Prize. And I want to believe it's in the archives. I want to believe that someone has a copy of it somewhere. And I'm just saying that out loud because I see there are 37 people here, and maybe one of you, might know someone who might have some idea of where that poem would be. That would have been like a perfect artifact, a fixture to insert into the film. And frankly, I'm not sure that this project is finished. I feel like I feel like this story, there's so much about the story that still needs to be told. And that if Abba and Campbell and Peter would not have had just the confines of a school year, that the more people they would have spoken to, the more stories and the more depth that we would have gotten. But anyway, I'm so incredibly proud of the work that they did. Abba, I'm curious, because I've never really asked you this. What was it that made you want, because it was before the class even started. You came into the class, which is rare for a student to come into this class knowing what story he or she wants to tell. What was it in the spring that made you feel compelled to tell the story?
I definitely think you touched on it when we were reading the articles about Ta-Nehisi Coates. And I think for me, coming from a public school where I think I was used to seeing more people of my color, I just felt like I needed to, I don't know if this is the right phrasing, like be in touch with my inner Blackness, but I just felt like it was really important for me to do a project on Black excellence and just someone of my color. And so after reading Ta-Nehisi Coates and as a Black person reading his work, when you read it, he like tells you, like calls on you that like you need to do something. And so I kind of felt like that after reading that. And there were many like other ideas I had for Springboard, but nothing stuck with me like this one.
Can I enter a little more about the cosmic power? Because as this progressed and we got deeper and deeper in this, there became a very clear University of Penn connection. And we ended up meeting and getting some great input from Mark Warner, who was Tom's roommate during football camps for 2 years in a row. And when you go to football camp before school starts, you have a couple weeks and you're sequestered somewhere else. And I didn't really know that much about Penn, although they had recruited me. But I went to my father's friend's funeral, who it turned out was a Plant High graduate in Tampa, Florida. He then was a PG at Mercersburg. He then went to Penn, and then he mentored a young man 2 years behind me and helped him get into Penn. And he played with Tom Leslie on the freshman team. And at his funeral, I heard the Penn story from my father's friend's celebration of life. That led me then to Mark Warner. And then meanwhile, we have John Versandik, who was one of Tom's best friends, who went to Penn and even got Tom to join as the first Black fraternity brother of a Jewish fraternity. So I think there's more than cosmic powers. I think the whole world was saying to Abba, "You're going to go to Penn. You're going to go to Penn." I think it's a great story. And then the last thing, Abba told me strictly, you've got to get your information in by a certain date. The day before that date, I made one last phone call to John Hook, who was in our class, and I was trying to confirm some of the things about the Shippensburg game. And I said, Tom Leslie. He goes, Tom Leslie. And he starts telling me all these things. He actually met Tom Leslie's father in person. And no one else had even really known. We knew he had a father, but we didn't know he was in his life at all. And so now we have John Hook, who's based in New York, an ex-journalist, semi-trained lawyer, didn't practice, financial writer now, and he's like a bulldog. He's picked up things that we're trying to find the family. We're trying to find Tom's mother and possibly his sister. And so we hope the story won't stop. We hope some other kids might want to help do this in the future. So
I don't think the story will stop. And I know, Campbell and Abba, you didn't say this specifically, but I know that you tried very hard to speak with a lot of our other early Black graduates, and that was hard because some of them are lost. Literally, we don't know where they are, but some of them passed too soon. And then some were wary about engaging, I think, in the conversation. We do have Granville Smith here. I think, Granville, you're able to speak or provide commentary.
Can you hear me now, Jen?
Yes, I can hear you. Hi.
Oh,
yes,
great,
hi,
great.
Granville.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Jen. Apologize for my technological difficulties. I think it was user error. But
that's okay. You're here now.
All right, great. First of all, I'd like to congratulate again all the students that contributed to this project, and the faculty members and the alumni. It was a great film, it was a great story. I didn't realize it, but I guess I was in one of the first few classes of African-American entrance to Mercer. I started there in 1967, graduated in 69, so I went 2 years. But I didn't realize that just a few years prior to that, the school was integrated. So I think that the Tom Leslie legacy and story had a great interest for me because, he must have been blazed a nice path, because I didn't really feel that, we were one of the first classes of African-American students. So I'm sure he endured a lot of change and experienced, a lot of things differently from where he came from. And so did we. But I do think, a pioneer, or the first one, always kind of goes to first and takes a lot of the brunt of things. The Randolph-Macon story interests me because when I started there as a junior, I started on the junior varsity team, and we had a away trip to Randolph-Macon. And I remember we were on the bus, and one of the coaches came up to me. In fact, the running back coach came up to me and he said, "Be prepared for some choice words you might hear down there." And I was a relatively naive kid when I went to Mercersburg, so I really wasn't even sure what he was talking about. But we went down there, and sure enough, as during the game and so on, there was a few choice words that were said to me that really took me by surprise. So it was we really, at Mercersburg, we really didn't feel, at least I didn't feel that much of a separation. But when we did travel to some of the schools in the South to play sports, especially Randolph-Macon and especially Massanutten Military Academy, there were some things said and done that obviously you look back on and, view as some pretty bad things. But all in all, it was a great experience. And the main reason I wanted to interject here was, and I've had a couple conversations, email, also over the phone with Jen and some other Mercersburg alumni, is that I don't know if there was ever any honor or memoriam to honor Tom Leslie as the first African-American graduate. And, I started some conversations with some people about possibly scholarships, which might be a little ambitious as far as what my commitment might be, or maybe even the work I'd be willing to put into it, to be honest with you. But I'm wondering if there's any other type of a plaque or memoriam we could put together to honor Tom. Whether it's a plaque on one of the buildings, whether it's something in, one of the buildings, something that would be permanent, but maybe something not quite as ambitious as a scholarship or something like that. And I'm wondering if anybody on the call or, would like to have some follow-up conversations with me, or who else would like to be involved in maybe setting up some type of memoriam like that.
Perfect. Thank you,
That sounds like a
Granville.
great project for students in the class next year, actually.
Yes.
And Mr. Smith, do you mind if we have a student in the fall reach out to you and interview you?
Oh, no, that would be great. That'd be fantastic.
All right, thank you.
I look
Thank
forward
you.
to
I'll
it.
just get the information from Jen.
Yep. That'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Granville, can I give you one quick thing that Ron Seymour told me? He may have told JD, but he made it his ex-coach and athletic director later became his head coach when he returned from college. And they had a conversation, and it was the opinion of that gentleman that Mercersburg absolutely stood its ground and probably helped accelerate the racial integration for Randolph-Macon. So it's the beginning of a legacy that John Versandik has put in words that I think is true. We had all sorts of federal laws, but it took something like that to shake up that school and get a new headmaster, now called head of school.
And I agree, and I think I would like to thank Mr. Plants for that. I remember him as our AD, and also obviously Tom Leslie as being a pioneer there. So I do owe debt of gratitude to both of them.
Absolutely. And Granville, I think you may be interested to know, if you don't know already, that one of your classmates, again, this is in line with some of the stories that we've heard here tonight about and post-COVID, and did that change? And then after we hear from the teachers, I think Richard Himes has another comment or question, and we have another special guest who wants to join in and say something. So, Kristen?
Yeah, Jen, could you ask the question again? There was a blackout in the borough, so I think we lost power. So, yeah, and
okay.
The person doesn't appear to be back yet.
Oh, well, the question, JD, then you can start, is I was curious about process as teachers and what that looked like. Once the students identified their project, how did you support them and help them pre-COVID, post-COVID? And was that different?
It was certainly different, but I think somewhat ironically, this ended up being a banner year for Springboard. We had to put up 103 projects virtually. So we asked the kids to record their presentations, and then each kid had a live Q&A. And I have to admit, I was skeptical that process would work. And so we came up with a system that did work. But what was magical about it, I think, is that we had presentations that had upwards of 60 people attending, and that's not something we would normally have. And then we had attendees who had never been to a Springboard presentation in the past, because they had always been live and on campus. So the word about the power of Springboard really got out, and that's something that we couldn't have had, I think, without the remote spring. As far as supporting them, I tried to give them all the resources they need. I ask them constantly, what do you need from me? What do you need from me? Abba will tell you that 9 times out of 10, she'd tell me, I don't need anything. We are doing just fine, which, this year, the students in parallel histories were probably the strongest collective that we've had to this point. And I would say that my role in their success was minimal after about I would say about the time we got back from winter break. But yeah, I would every once in a while they'd need budget so they could get a flash drive that was large enough to hold all of their material, or and the novel course, a student said that I wish I were better at writing dialogue, so introduce him to Ernest Hemingway then, right? Whatever, and buy the book that he needs. It's like I said, that I'm not really teaching very much. I'm facilitating. I'm walking alongside and letting them know that I'm always here. Abba would come to me with questions once a week. What about this? What about that? One thing I'd like to mention before we sign off is that the courage that the Academy has of letting parallel histories tell the stories authentically. And actually, when I say Mercersburg Academy, I should say Katie Titus. And then I don't know if she recalls this conversation, but that I did ask her, if we tell these stories, we're going to unearth some unpleasant things. And she hasn't been daunted by that. In fact, she encourages us to tell the authentic story. So yeah, I want to laud her for that.
Thank you. And I think Kristen is back now. So I'm glad you were able to make it back. There are some very big storms, thunderstorms. If we were all here together in person, we'd be sheltered down in the dining hall because you couldn't go outside. But Kristen, I just was curious if you wanted to share some final thoughts on the process of how you were able to continue supporting your students in these strange times and when we were sort of working virtually.
I just got a message from my computer saying that my internet is still unstable, so we'll see. I hope everyone can hear me okay, but it certainly was a challenge to pivot and transition to working on online, but Campbell and Abba and Peter and I and Mr. Bennett, JD, came up with a plan pretty quickly. And, I will say with Campbell was, we only could have one driver. So he was doing all of the actual editing on his computer, and it was quite a process, but I mean the team still continued. They had almost daily meetings. We were able to I think I previewed almost every single one of Campbell's versions that they created, and I mean it took a little longer, but I think, just with their dedication, the skills that they'd already acquired throughout the year, and just the passion for the project, it was going to be done, and it was going to be done well, because these kids are so committed. These students are so committed to this project and wanting to see it done, and done extremely well. So, there was a lot of problem solving, but it's a solid team. And I think that one of my happiest moments, I think, of the year was hearing the students, all 3 of them, in their final presentation, talking about the relationships that they built, not only with one another, because Abba, Peter, and Campbell and Peter had a relationship you know, had a connection prior to Com Arts, but they really didn't know Abba very well. And they are so close now, and they made such a real connection, and the connection that they made with the students from the past, I think was tremendous, and just having the resource of Charlie, and you know, it was just fun to see those relationships being forged. So you know, I think that the team felt like they had a greater purpose, and where COVID-19 was a struggle, they had the skills and they had the drive to do it. So it really, you know, one of the things that I love about Springboard is it really is about the students' drive. And I can't think throughout the year, and it's such a, I don't know if Campbell and Abba feel this way, but it's, you know, creating this project. But it was really about the end goal, and they achieved that. And it's not about anybody.
Kristen, I think you're breaking up a little. Is she breaking up for everybody else?
I would also add one quick thing, because I wouldn't forget myself if I didn't say this. This project, like, I'm behind the scenes working on the editing. Like, Miss Pixler is the one behind the guy behind the scenes, and this project just would never have happened if Miss Pixler, and she will never admit to this, but this project would never have happened if Miss Pixler hadn't just been the greatest Com Arts teacher ever. I emailed her numerous times at like 10 o'clock at night on Tuesdays asking her for help, and she responded within 3 minutes. So she is definitely the greatest Com Arts teacher of all time.
That's awesome. Okay, Abba, I think you had something that you wanted to say. Kristen, you're back. You just got highly complimented by Campbell as being the greatest Com Arts teacher ever, which we all know is true. Sorry that you're having internet difficulty, but Abba, I think you had something that you wanted to say to Granville Smith, and then I think we have Richard Himes. I'll come back to you, Richard, after Abba.
Yes, I just wanted to tell Mr. Smith that before, in the fall, I actually had the opportunity to talk to Clarence Young's class of '68. His daughter, Vanessa Youngs, is a member of our board, and she visited campus, and she was a great resource, and so was he in our project. And this year marked the 30th anniversary of the BSU. So during alumni weekend, a lot of the Black alums came back, and we had a dinner. And at that dinner, Tanya Rutherford and Vanessa Youngs presented how we're in the process of starting a scholarship fund in honor of Tom Leslie. I don't know why I didn't say that when you were talking about it, but it just clicked in my head. And so I think that if you really want to get involved, I would definitely say reach out to them, because they are really in the process of getting that started.
Great, thanks, Abba. Richard, I think you're with us. And
yeah.
Okay, hi.
Comment was about the scholarship fund too, because it wasn't clear when Granville was first talking, but I totally support that. As I think the best way to honor Tom's legacy is with that kind of scholarship, to reach out to multiple other potential students. So I applaud that. Hopefully I can support that. And Abba, just good luck at Penn. My wife is a Penn graduate, so enjoy. You'll love it.
Thank you so much.
You can't see it, but I was a 4-year student at Mercersburg. And so in honor of that, I'm wearing a white shirt, a black tie, and black socks, but shorts. Only some of you will get that, but those that do will know what I mean.
I love it. I love it.
Thanks for organizing this.
Well, I'm sorry that we can't see you. You'll have to take you can take a selfie and send it in, or post it on social media with hashtag Mberg Reunion.
Right.
So Katie Titus, our head of school, has been with us this evening listening in, and I know she wants to provide some closing remarks. But before I turn it over to Katie, I want to say again, thank you to all of you as our panelists, And I wanted to see if you had a quick 10-second, 30-second closing comment that you wanted to share, each of you. And Charlie, we'll start with you. And I know brevity is not your strength, but I know you could also be quick when I call you on it.
Jen suggested that I talk to my son, class of 93. He said it's time that Mercersburg create the equivalent of a digital 15. And I think that we have started a new way of communicating at a time that we needed to be able to do it digitally. And so maybe that's something to think about too.
Thank you, Charlie. Abba.
I just really wanted to thank Mr. Bennett and Ms. Pixler for just being so supportive to us every road down this project. I know that for me, I get very emotional during times and I feel very overwhelmed. And I think that you guys were really awesome and just always pushing Campbell, Peter, and I, and just letting us trust ourselves and let our voices shine. And I think will be forever grateful for that. And just to Peter and Campbell, just to say like how proud of us I am. I think we did such a great job, and I'm just so grateful we were able to do it together, because I definitely don't think I could have done it alone.
Thank you, Abba. Campbell?
Yeah, I agree with everything. Again, I could talk for hours about how much Miss Pixler has helped me, and I'd probably get a little emotional during that. But I think I've just so grateful to have been able to work on this project. Like it was kind of alluded to, my grandfather graduated with Charlie in '65, and just kind of being able to come full circle. I know for me personally, every time I see the Boys to Men video, something about me, the Mercersburg documentary that was made a little bit before that time, I always just get a little emotional thinking of all the history at Mercersburg. And so I'm glad that I could contribute in some small way to the history of Mercersburg and telling of Tom's story.
Thank you, Campbell. Kristen, closing comments.
I just want to thank everyone for coming, but I want to especially thank all the partners that made this happen. This didn't happen in isolation. There were so many alumni. Charlie Guy was an amazing resource. And Mr. Bennett, JD, is an incredible partner and such an amazing guide through all of this. But I really want to thank my students, Peter and Campbell, and Abba. I feel like you're mine too. Stealing her from Mr. Bennett just for a half a second. But it was such an amazing gift to be able to witness you all following this project, and it was such an important project for us to tell the school, and it couldn't be more timely. And when I think of you all as future leaders, it really gives me so much hope for us globally, because you both are just amazing, hardworking, compassionate, critical thinkers, and you're willing to do long and hard things to achieve goals, and you both want, and Peter included, to make a difference. And it just gives me great hope, and I couldn't be more proud.
Thank you. John David.
Yeah, I just want to mention that our students have so many more stories to tell. And the participants out there, if you have a great Mercersburg story that you believe just needs to be told, please let us know. In addition, Tom Leslie's name has been mentioned quite a bit tonight, but there are also two other Black students who came in 1964 at the same time that Tom Fleming did. Forgive me, Tom Leslie did. They were Tom Fleming and Conrad Vickers. We've lost contact with Conrad Vickers, and Tom Fleming unfortunately passed away, died of cancer a few years ago, and had a long, fabulous career as a public school administrator. He's a legend in the town where he worked for a very long time. So just wanted to make sure that Tom Fleming and Conrad Vickers' names were mentioned tonight.
Thank you, John David. I've posted a couple of links in the chat just so you all can see. If you haven't already seen the documentary, then it's there. I've also posted some more about the capstone academic experiences that we've spoken about, and also a link to a website where you'll get to see some more of the Springboard presentations. I think it was Abba and Campbell who mentioned those earlier, that there were so many tremendous student projects that happened. So I hope you'll take some time to check that out. And without further ado, I want to turn it over to our head of school, Katie Titus, who's here to provide some brief conclusion remarks.
Thanks, Jen. You know, it was interesting listening to all of you and the way in which you elected to close out this incredible journey that you took us on tonight. What I heard so clearly was our mission. And I didn't obviously plan for that, but you were all so humble in the way in which you actually held up and celebrated everybody else on the call. And I think that I just want to thank you for representing our school so well, and that individual humility and collective pride is something that you are embodying here for all of us on this call. And I'm incredibly grateful to you for that. And I just want to emphasize too that, you know, JD mentioned it. I do think understanding our history is critical to being sure that we can continue to be better in our future. And Tom Leslie's story is one that I think if we had layers to this and there was access to more information, if he was here to tell his story, we would know more. And given everything that's going on in the world, I think understanding our history and really thinking about how we can continue to be better in our future is going to be important work going forward. So thank you to Abba and to Campbell for setting the groundwork for us in this incredible journey.
Thank you, Katie. And thank you again to our panelists. I know everybody is sort of on mute, but we are snapping or clapping. We're so thrilled that you're here with us tonight. And this is just the start of reunion weekend. There's a live session tomorrow with the class of 1985, Arts and Entertainment. I keep saying it promises to be entertaining. So I hope you'll join in for that. And then we'll get to be with Katie again on Saturday morning at 11. So please join in for the State of the School, which there are lots of great updates there about what this year was and the challenges that we overcame together, and what's coming. And then Saturday night, we will have at 7 o'clock 13 simultaneous virtual class gatherings with hundreds of people from around the globe and the country joining in to toast their reunion and their classes. And we are committed, as I've said, we are committed to celebrating you all in person when we can. June 2021, it should be on the calendar. So thanks for coming tonight. Be well, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thank all of you. Very fun.
Charlie, we owe you so much with this.
No, I got the most out of this than anyone. I promise you. It was a blast. It was a blast.
Abba, it's been a blessing. 2 years. I'm the lucky one there.
So sad it's over.
Oh, Abba, your journey is just beginning, my friend.
It's the beginning.
Katie, remember in that cold night after the Black Student Union meeting, we talked about Abba, and
Yep.
I'll never forget, you said after I met her, I had to get her to come to our school. And
I think she knows that story where I called Mr. McDowell. It's right after I met her, and I said, we got to get her here. So
she led us, which is a whole nother story, to how Mercersburg became an integrated school. And that's a story that's bugged us. You know, what bugged us the most is what happened to Tom Leslie and what was the backstory on why did Mercersburg integrate when they did. And because of Abba, I think we've discovered that story, and that's a whole separate story. It's an exciting one. Thanks, Abba.
And Abba, you know, with everything that's going on right now, that Ta-Nehisi Coates is writing at this very moment. And that next month, probably the cover story of The Atlantic is going to be his encapsulation of everything that's happening. And it's going to be made clear, finally. somehow he has that magical ability.
Yeah, yeah. I'm excited to read whatever he produces. It's going to be a good
it's
one.
happening right now.
Mm-hmm.
I just got a text from somebody said, "You guys are still live." I said, "It's like the credits. It's like the outtakes. You know, we're just
It's
yeah, it's the bloopers / outtakes. We're reveling in our virtual company, and just it is sad that it's over, Abba, but it is just the beginning. I'm so excited for you and Campbell as you begin your journey as Mercersburg alumni, and this is always going to be your home. You can always come back, and you're a part of an incredible community, as I think you know. So thanks again,
Pixler,
everybody. Denise,
you and Jen are the league leaders in it with your inability to take a compliment.
Oh gosh.
But yeah, my humble opinion, and I don't know who's listening. You are the Springboard goat.
Yeah.
Oh, the goat! Yes.
Nice.
I don't know. I think my students
Campbell?
are the goats.
It's on
Yeah, I get it. But you certainly create the atmosphere.
It's easy with these kids, these students. Sorry.
And well, they certainly make it easier.
They do.
Wow. So good to see everybody. I hope
Good night.
everyone is well. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Katie. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Katie.